All right, I'd love to welcome Dr. Anthony Mazzella back to the show. I always enjoy talking to you. And Dr. Mazzella, thank you so much for being here again today.
It's my pleasure. I'm very much looking forward to this. I always appreciate a deeper dive into things that we already started to think through. So thank you.
No, I'm glad to have you, and let's take that deep dive. So, we are picking up where we left off, which was talking about guilt and shame, and those were the last couple episodes that we've done on
Mhm.
that. And I love to dive a little further into this. So maybe let's just get started by maybe a quick summary. Each
Sure.
of us could do on guilt and shame, kind of what the difference is or what the similarities are.
Yeah, sure. Go for it, and I'll jump in if you don't mind, and we'll put it all together. Okay.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to summarize it by saying that guilt is I did something wrong, and shame is I am wrong. Like I'm
Okay.
broken, I'm bad. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. And so, where I kind of summarize the difference is that guilt focuses on your behavior,
Mhm.
whereas shame focuses on your identity. It's
Yeah.
more, internalized, shame is more internalized, whereas guilt can stay a little more external. It is
Mhm.
about, the emotions commonly felt with guilt are regret and remorse, whereas the emotions commonly felt with shame are worthlessness and
Yes.
humiliation.
Yes. Yes. Very good. Shame is sort of looking inward. Like you said, something is like wrong with me. And guilt is more interpersonal, the way that I see it, because of that piece where you're looking to repair some damage that you've created. So guilt has that interpersonal piece, which then implies that you also have some capacity for empathy, for concern, for connection with another person, which usually go missing when you're thinking about shame.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%. I think guilt can be more healthy. It can be
Mhm.
productive, like it pushes us to correct our wrongs, but shame pushes us to isolate, to
Yep.
withdraw, to even self-sabotage and self-harm, emotionally, mentally, the self-talk and all of that. It becomes very it's internally toxic.
Yeah, and then that reminds me of one other critical piece, but again, everybody could go back and listen to those few episodes because we went into far more detail there. We went into what it looks like. We distinguished between the two. We looked at the origins of each one of them. So
Mhm.
when I just mentioned this piece about guilt being reparative and the part about empathy, that's what you and I were calling healthy guilt at that time. And then we differentiated it from pathological guilt, which is really close to shame anyway. So that's when someone regresses from guilt or collapses, let's say. They lose the capacity for guilt and slip into more of a shame state.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, one example I like to use is guilt says, "Hey, I forgot my friend's birthday. I feel really bad and I want to apologize. I want to go make it
Mhm.
right." Whereas shame says, "I forgot my friend's birthday. I'm such a horrible person. I always ruin everything."
Yeah, like what's wrong with me, right? And then they
Mhm.
can start the self-attacking or isolating, like pull away
Mhm.
from the friend, for instance.
Mm.
Or conversely, believe it or not, this is still shame, blaming the friend. Well, why didn't they remind me? Or why are they making such a big deal? I only missed it by a day. In other words, like, what's wrong with them? See, that's a
Right.
good way, not a good way, but one of the ways that someone deals with shame is they make somebody else feel what they can't bear to tolerate.
Yeah. You bring up a good point. I think, and I'll ask, does shame push people into a protective mode, whereas guilt doesn't do that? Because what you're describing right there, when they start passing the blame, that's a self defense protection mode. And
Yes.
shame pushes us into that, whereas guilt doesn't have that same effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the reasons it's so commonly associated with narcissism, because
Mhm.
one definition of narcissism, there are many, of course, because it's so complex, but it's mostly thought of as a defensive structure. So there's your defensive mode. So always
Mhm.
try to get rid of everything that emanates from within and then see it from without, because one's self-esteem or one sense of self cannot tolerate taking on that responsibility.
Yeah. I think it does help clear up a lot of the confusion around narcissistic defense mechanisms.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how can someone know whether they're feeling guilty because of something they did or ashamed because of who they are. Like, how do we know whether we're experiencing guilt or shame?
So this is a wonderful question because they're so commonly confused. And this is so important because if you're confusing whether you're feeling ashamed for who you are versus guilty, and oftentimes it could present as guilt, then one may take the wrong healing or what I call in my field treatment approach. So then things
Mhm.
don't change. So I'd like to answer your question with a clinical vignette, like an example, so we could
Okay.
really look at how this, all of this relates to somebody who might be listening or watching this.
Okay.
So, Renee, and you're familiar with this example too. And just so the listeners know, I'll set a little bit of a stage for it. This comes from a podcast, basically, because this stuff is all over social media these days. People are very open with their experiences. So this comes from a podcast that I was listening to with a very popular doctor, therapist, and author. I'll call him Dr. R just to protect confidentiality. And he's specifically known for his work on relationships. And this fellow has written several well-known books. The host is also a public figure and very well known. So I'm going to refer to him as Frank, okay? Just again to protect the privacy of both
Hmm.
parties. So in this exchange, Frank is recounting a story, right? Oh, by the way, Frank's language is a little bit strong, Renee. So I just want to check with you on that in terms of how you feel about me using strong language. I don't typically do it, but I'm a little torn because I want to stay true to the affect of his experience. But on the other hand, I want to just be mindful of that. Okay.
Yeah.